This is the story of Jens Jensen, poet of the prairie, maker of public parks, prophet of conservation.
In these immigrant neighborhoods where huge swaths of dense, largely unpoliced, deeply unsanitary slums sit right next to these oceans of factories and warehouses where all of these immigrant workers are employed, working 12, 14 hours a day, 6 and 7 days a week.
You know, he told me, many is the time I walked over the prairie on the edge of the west side where I lived, tears streaming down my eyes. Oh, it was so hard to survive.
Jensen would talk about how he took these long train rides across the Great Plains, and he would say, "Don't you see it? Don't you see it? I see a great spiritual force rising off of the prairie." And the prairie became the theme of his life's work.
I was attracted by the immensity of the sea, and in its place came the Great Plains of America. It is the strength of America, the greatest strength we have, far more powerful than the mountains. I was fortunate enough to come early enough to see large stretches of plains west of Chicago, acres and acres of black-eyed Susan. You could almost see the reflection against the sky above. This outburst of color, that's the greatness of the plains of North America. But you know, wherever you go where there's forest, there's peace. There's something else, and that is that we have this intense beauty. And beauty gives you peace wherever you meet it in the world.
I think his vision of the native landscape was that combination of savanna with trees, open prairie with just grasses and wildflowers, as well as these wooded slopes like we see here in the waterfall area at Columbus Park. His palette included the sky, it included the sun, it included the wind and the clouds passing over the sky. And so the prairie as a group of plants is kind of an ecological definition.
A 1905 study of the West and South Side ghettos revealed there was only one bath for every 600 people. The sons of Frederick Law Olmsted were hired to create small, desperately needed parks for the South Side, while Jensen tackled the West Side. The Olmsted parks included field houses, where immigrants could get vaccinated, learn English, and take baths. Teddy Roosevelt hailed them as revolutionary.
Upon looking at Olmsted's very classical, rigid designs, Jensen wrote, "Playgrounds would gain much by having more green and less gravel."
But as blighted as the South Side was, the West was even worse. These parks were described as bleak plains, destitute of vegetation.
People reported seeing neighborhood boys fishing for rats between the floorboards, and he wanted them to experience swimming in a swimming hole, sitting in the shade looking out at the sunshine.
He felt that urban children didn't know where their food came from, and so he thought the best thing you could do is dig in the dirt and get your hands dirty. Kids would be able to bring home whatever produce they grew, and they would have enough left over that they would just donate bushel baskets full to orphanages and other charities.
It was the building of Gary after J.P. Morgan and Carnegie organized U.S. Steel and began to literally clear a wilderness, raising the dunes all the way down to the clay level underneath to build the U.S. Steel Gary Works stretching 7 miles along the shoreline. This was what convinced the Prairie Club that the state of Indiana wanted to industrialize the entire shoreline.
Now the battle to save the dunes could begin in earnest. Jensen assembled a team of conservationists, many past clients, people he called doers. The Friends of Our Native Landscape were a who's who of Chicago's elite: Avery Coonley, Gussie Rosenwald, and Stephen Mather, the millionaire Chicago industrialist who would become the first director of the new National Park Service.
As Teddy Roosevelt was adding to the national park system, Stephen Mather proposed this radical idea that the federal government should purchase land within a major metropolitan area to create a national park which could have stretched the entire Indiana shoreline.
Jensen needed a new plan. On Memorial Day in 1917, a crowd of 40,000 trekked to Michigan City to see the Dunes pageant. In an amphitheater of sand called the Jensen Blowout, nearly 1,000 actors portrayed Indians, European fur traders, pioneers, and the evil city developers. Dancers performed the roles of waves, wind nymphs, birds, and tree hearts. It was Woodstock, Earth Day, and Lawrence of Arabia all rolled into one. A day-long performance recounting the relentless onslaught of civilization against nature. In the end, the ghosts of history and the spirits of nature persuade the wily developer to abandon his plans to bring industry to the region. "We will never tame the sand dunes," he said. "They were made by God to just play in the breeze." Jensen had won and lost battles against the system. Now he would get away from the city he had done so much for. Far away. Jensen took his family to the wilds of Wisconsin. First via train, then mail train, and last, on foot. Ellison Bay is a remote Wisconsin peninsula. Steep cliffs and few roads made it almost impossible to reach. It could be as bleak and inaccessible as Greenland. Although Anna Marie preferred the city, Jensen was so taken by the experience that he purchased land as a summer getaway.
I've been looking for a place in the country for some years, and you get down on the edge of the cliffs, get the feel of this wind, and let it blow through you. You can feel the fathers and mothers and the brothers and sisters in the igloos of the Eskimos far up in the Arctic country. You can feel them because the wind that kisses their cheeks also kisses mine.
He said to me once, "You know, I came out of the sea. I have in my blood fighting blood. That's why I locate right here. It's the only sea that I have, this inland sea."
The greatest thing that Jensen did was to value the natural landscape, and he convinced others of that value.
Jensen had a core belief that people need the living green or they would shrivel up inside.
He took a native landscape and showed it to us in a way that made it beautiful and understandable, and put it in a place where we could actually see it.
He was really preaching sort of a revolution in terms of encouraging the change in the way people think about the world they live in.
Jensen was ahead of his time in thinking about preserving land and biodiversity, and now we're catching up with that.
I was entirely enveloped in over 100 acres of solid forest. I walked down and forgot myself entirely. I was out of the strife. I was out of the war. There wasn't anything but friendliness and love that greeted me. I was so happy about it.